Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone attending the Planning Committee meeting today, especially those in the public gallery and anyone watching the meeting via the webcast. To the members of the public in the gallery, I would like to remind you that this planning meeting is being broadcast live over the internet, so there is no need for any other filming at the meeting to take place. This meeting is available to view online now and in the future. Committee members, please be aware that we are all on camera and you may be visible on screen when people around you are speaking. Please remember to speak clearly into your microphones. We welcome the use of the Welsh language at meetings. I have had no request for people to speak Welsh today, so the meeting will be conducted in English only. Please can all mobile phones and any other devices be put on silent. If there is an emergency alarm, please follow the green signs and go to the ground floor to the Civic Car Park. Thank you. I'll now ask the officers to introduce themselves. Perhaps we can start with Polly.
Good afternoon, I'm Polly Ellis. I'm a solicitor with the Council's Legal Department.
Rachel Beale, Democratic Services Officer.
Hello, Richard Lewis, Head of Planning and Development. Paul Wheeldon, Group Leader, Highway Development.
Tanya Leck, Planning Officer.
Norman Jones, Team Leader, Applications.
Helen Smith, Principal Planner.
Sarah Hensby, Planning Officer.
Gemma Evans, Team Leader, Enforcement.
Thank you. Right, we'll start with agenda item 1, attendance and apologies. Are there any apologies, Rachel?
I have had apologies from Councillor Ron Burnett and Councillor Jason O'Connor.
Thank you. Do members know of any other apologies? Councillor Shepherd, thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Over to our legal advisor.
Firstly, can I remind members that you need to complete the declaration of interest form in the attendance register folder if you're declaring an interest in any application. The following interests are to be declared. In agenda item 4, Councillor Veronica Crick declares a personal non-prejudicial interest in agenda item 4 as a member of Crossy Killiog and Llanarafon Community Council. And Councillor Stephen Evans declares a personal non-prejudicial interest in agenda item 4 as a member of Llanarafon Social Club. Agenda item 5, Councillor Stuart Ashley declares a personal non-prejudicial interest in agenda item 5 as a member of Cwmbran Community Council, which has been consulted on the application. Agenda item 6, Councillors Norma Parish and Gaynor James declare a personal non-prejudicial interest in agenda item 6 as members of Pontypool Community Council, which has been consulted on the application. And Councillor Stephen Evans declares a personal non-prejudicial interest in that agenda item as a member of Brecon Beacons National Park Authority, who have commented on the application. Are there any other declarations that need to be made? No? Chair.
Thank you. We'll go to item 3, minutes of the planning meeting held on the 21st of January. Will someone move there a true record? Is it seconded? We all agree? Thank you. Are there any comments or questions on those minutes? No, thank you. We'll move on to item agenda 4, which is planning application number 19/P/0337/FUL. Proposed outbuilding to be used for storage, amendment to original scheme, and it's sited at land at Llanarafon Recreation Ground, Llanarafon, Cwmbran. This is on pages 23 to 36 of your report, and we had a site inspection last July at this site, and the minutes are attached to your agendas. Tanya Leck will present this application. Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this application is to site an outbuilding for storage associated with Llanarafon Football Club. A member site visit was undertaken in July 2019. However, the application has changed since that site visit. That was in response to a high number of public objections and concerns raised through the consultation responses. So the information in the report and in this presentation relate to the amended scheme. So the building would be sited on Llanrafn playing fields, where there's an established use for Llanrafn Football Club. Llanrafn Social Club is situated to the south and is accessed via a footpath. I'm going to show you here. The building would be used for storage equipment used in association with the football club. The playing fields do fall within the flood zone, C2. The outbuilding is proposed to the southern end of the field and would be adjacent to Millwater allotments. Here. It's approximately 3 metres from the boundary of the allotments. There's a bend that runs along here that provides an informal footpath that would continue along the rear of the building. The building's approximately 20 metres from the closest residential boundary, which is here. The building is proposed to be a steel container, and in order to improve the appearance of the building, it would be finished with timber cladding and a pitched roof. The building is 6 metres long and 2.6 metres wide, with a maximum height of 3 metres. The materials for the building, the timber would be treated and would be stained green, and the roof would be Decra, which is stone-coated metal, and again that would be green. The building would be set on railway sleepers, and please note condition 6 would require the building to be secured to the ground or anchored to the ground. This is because of the location within a C2 flood zone and concerns that it could be moved in the event of a flood. So I've got some photographs here. So this first one is taken from the west of the playing fields, looking down towards the south of the site. The arrow is just to indicate where the container would be placed. And again, this is looking, so as you're walking up from the Llanrafn Social Club, if you were following the footpath, you'd be looking northwards up the field, again indicated where the container would be sited. And again, this is just centrally in the field looking down, so this gives you an indication of where it would be. This is a container that we've got on another site elsewhere in the borough, just to give you an indication of how it may look. So it would be a little different to this, but just so you can see how a steel container can look when it's got the timber cladding on top. And the recommendation is for approval subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I was reading a note I just made. Thank you, Tanya. Can I ask Faye Jones if she's got any interest to declare? The next one. Yeah. Item 5, is it? You got a... Right. Okay. Yeah. Before we open it up to questions, we have a speaker for this application. Councillor Glyn Karen, the ward member, would you like to come down now, please?
Thank you, Chair.
You have 5 minutes, as you know.
Oh, I won't take 5 minutes, Chair.
All
trust
right,
me.
well, Polly usually does the timing, so...
That's fine.
Okay.
You can time me in seconds.
Thank you.
Just really to say thank you to the committee for attending the site meeting and allowing me to bend all your ears while you were there. A special thanks to Tanya, who has spent quite a considerable amount of time dealing with me and issues over this application. You've seen the recommendations. I really don't have much to add. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Carron. We'll wait for Councillor Carron to go back to his seat before we start the questions. Right, any questions on this application? Steve?
As you can appreciate, this container is going to be on a bit of a floodplain. How have we looked into that to sort of alleviate the residents, concerned?
Thank you. Yes, it is in the C2 flood zone. We look at it as the category of development, so it's not highly vulnerable or vulnerable development that would require a flood consequences assessment. It would only be used for storage. The risk of it flooding, the football club have submitted an action plan which would basically set out that it wouldn't be used in the event of a flood. The council's drainage officer was happy with that, and NRW didn't request any further information in terms of the flood risk. It's been raised about if that area did flood, the impact of the water, could that move the container? So that's why we've requested that, or we've put on an extra condition to require it to be anchored to the ground. So if that area did flood, it wouldn't be moved.
The reason I asked that, if there is going to be service water along the field, they would have to have access through the houses coming up where all the field, and that's going to be located. That would probably have an effect on the residents living there and the mess.
Sorry, do you mean in terms of drainage from the building?
It's where the houses are and the container is going to be in the field in front. If you've got no access to the container through the field walkway, which is going to be flooded, they'll have to come through where the houses are. And that's why the residents are probably, are concerned of the impact it'll have on them with the mess and everything else. And that's why I'm reading that.
In order to access the container, it would only need to be accessed when the football club is playing or whether they're training. So in the event of a flood, they wouldn't be playing or training there anyway. So in terms of accessing the container, it would just be left as is if the football wasn't on. In terms of installing the container, they need to do that in the summer months. They wouldn't be able to do that at the moment. So any mess that was associated with... Sorry, I don't know if that's...
I asked if they need to get the container, which is going to be waterproof, to get their equipment out, they'd have to get access to there somehow.
We don't know how they'll do that. That's just up to the club. I would suggest that in the event that something happens there, it's up to the club to arrange an appropriate access. But we don't have any issues in terms of that happening. Our issue was whether there was any danger in terms of people using the actual storage container. So we've not really got anything to add to that.
Right, thank you. Stuart and then Veronica.
When we went on site visit, we walked up from Lanny Club up to where this is sited, and it's still the same site, isn't it? It's further down, is it? Much further down. Yeah, no, I was trying to get where it was sited, but so the actual site that we walked up to is much further up, isn't it? Yeah, no. What I'm concerned about is because obviously it's next door to the allotment. That's okay. Because a major concern about the original siting, which was proximity of housing. So that car parking issue would be on the site of the Lanny Club, not on the. I'm trying to make sure that the problem that we originally had was the original proposition was to put a container or a siting facility next to the houses, and that you've obviously done away with that. I mean, I really don't have a problem if that's the proposition. Neither does the local ward councillor. That was the major concern that we observed. So if you've managed to do away with that, fair enough. That was the one question I had. The next question really is down the lines of its aesthetics. Obviously, you're content under the playing fields directive that this thing is excluded under that, because I did read this report quite thoroughly. It's excluded under that directive from what I can see of this report. It's obviously, if there's any issue with what we've had recently with fields flooding, that is pinned to the ground, so it doesn't go anywhere, because it's a very heavy object. And you're satisfied that that's the case?
Thank you.
Tanya.
Yes, so on the first point, during the committee site visit, we did walk up to the original location, which was proposed here, and there was access through Riversmead. The football club, who were the applicant, took on board a lot of the comments and issues that were raised, and that's why they chose to move it to the towards the south of the field. You can see the social club is here, and you can just walk straight up through them, so it's actually quite close in comparison to where it was previously. I know there's existing issues around car parking. Where it's sited at the moment, the easiest way and the quickest way is to park at the social club and to walk through the way at the bottom rather than to come through the houses. Obviously we can't say that won't happen. I know there's existing issues, but this wouldn't encourage that to happen anymore.
Can I come back to you? The question was, when we were on site, was why wouldn't they put this as near to the club as possible, because that would seem to be an equitable solution to this problem. Was there any reason it precluded it?
Yes, so the club wanted the storage on the field so that they can get the equipment out straight onto the field. It is relatively close now to the social club. It's away from residential properties. The nearest boundary is 20 metres. So they've taken elements of the comments on board and the amendment of the scheme. The second point you raised around the flooding, so we've added a condition that would require it to be anchored to the ground. So we don't have details of how that would be done at the moment, but they would need to come in and it would need to be approved how they could anchor that to the ground. We'd obviously need to look at that at that stage, but yeah, that's to stop it moving in the event of a flood.
I'm going to ask Chair, beg my indulgence. The recent flooding that we've had, none of it's gone on this bit of field, has it? That you know of?
There has been some water on the field. I'm not aware if the whole field was flooded. I don't think so. I'm not aware. Sorry, but it is boggy there. It's in a flood zone. I'm not aware if it's flooded.
It's a fairly obvious question, but because across the road from the Lanny Club, that was flooded, and it's such an obvious question to ask because we don't want to be giving planning permission for something that's obviously going to flood currently. It's such an obvious question.
Yeah, so we would look at the type of development as well. It's not highly vulnerable. There would be no use there apart from to store the equipment. So the drainage officer and NRW were satisfied with the use of the building in that location.
Veronica.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tanya, for explaining that. It's quite apparent when you compare where it was before. This is a much more suitable place, and the access through the allotments with the bund there makes sense. The only question I wanted to raise really was there is a comment in the report about the canopy of trees. And looking at that, it looks as if it's far further enough away for that to be a problem in the future. Can you just confirm that?
Yes, I'll show you on a photo. So you can see there's a tree that will be quite close to the corner of the container as you're looking at it straight on, but it would be set away from the tree. It's about 3 metres, and that includes the bend. And then the tree is set within the allotment, so there's enough sufficient distance to stop it being beneath the canopy of the trees. We've also looked at photos from in the summer when the tree was in bloom, it was still fine then.
Thank you. Stuart?
I'm wondering whether I need, Polly, do I need to make a declaration, because I've also got the chairship of tree allotments, and trees are actually an issue with allotments.
If you just want to declare a personal interest in that.
I will also raise the other aspect of this one, which the chair knows well, because she also serves on the allotment committee. And one of the issues with this particular allotment is that the issue of trees in and out. Am I valid in bringing this up, Chair? I just asked this because this is an issue on allotments, maintenance of trees, and I think that particular tree, if I remember rightly, is aspects of maintenance of trees. So it'd be worth you checking that, I suspect.
I'll ask the legal officer now. I sit with Stuart, who chairs the allotments working group for Torfaen. We are appointed to it, but I don't see the connection.
Okay.
Absolutely don't.
No, it's not a thing I've seen.
So you're going to declare an interest as a chair of the allotment?
I'll stand by whichever you say.
Are you saying that it's directly affecting the allotment, or are you saying that the maintenance of the tree?
Let's put it this way. One of the major conversations we have on allotments is about maintenance of trees, which is something that allotments have. If there was an issue with the person that's applying for this, possibly they have a discussion about being worried about that tree, which is a discussion we have quite often on allotments. I can see there might be some contention if that tree was not maintained properly. That's all. Sorry to bring that up, Chair, but you know the discussion as well as I do.
Yes, I know the discussions, but I can't see the connection with this.
Okay.
All trees need to be maintained.
Sorry, I'm not wanting to prolong this. I think this is probably a better solution than the one we had before. It's just looking at that. Trees do get big on allotments, and I can see that happening in future.
Right, okay, then we leave allotments out of it.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Who?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have a few questions, please, if I may. On page 27, under the sections received, the comments written in the report from the drainage officer, where it says flood bund, is that a technical term or is that a typo? Should that be boundary? What, for my benefit and other members' benefit, what is meant by the classification of a type C2 flood zone for that designation? And I noticed that the report then goes on to say that there were concerns that there was the possibility that they may wish to upgrade this in the future. Now, the report actually states that because of the size that the container is, it doesn't trigger SUDS requirements. But if that container was to be increased at a later date, then there's a possibility that it might trigger SUDS requirements. So I'm wondering whether we can impose in the conditions the size constraint on the container size. And the next thing I was going to say is, in terms of the storage, it's a little bit vague. It says only to be used for the storage of equipment used in association with the playing fields. could that please be amended just to state the storage of sports equipment? The concern I have there is, as most people know, a lot of these football and rugby clubs have quite an active social scene, and what I wouldn't like to see being stored in there would be something like propane or calogas canisters for use when they have a barbecue or have a function. So could we have that condition amended as well, just to read it's exclusively for the use of storage equipment? Other than that, I think I was okay with it.
Right, Richard will come in now.
Yeah, quite a few questions there. The first one was whether it was, the word was boundary. It's a bund, it's a flood bund, is what he was explaining. So it's a flood prevention bund, basically. What is C2? It's a classification of a flood area where we wouldn't want to see any vulnerable developments, so schools, houses, anywhere where people are vulnerable who occupy the site. A storage container wouldn't come within that classification. So we're okay with that. In terms of it being, in terms of triggering the SUDS requirement, it would have to be 100 square metres. Well, of course, this is only 15 square metres, so any increase in that side would need planning permission anyway. And I think the last one, in terms of sports equipment, I mean, this is up to members. We feel that, I mean, if they stored a barbecue set, I don't know whether that's something that is a problem. I don't see any reason why we can't have a look at that condition to see whether we try and firm it up a bit more, but we may need a conversation with the club just to make sure that we're not preventing them doing anything in association with the playing fields. So if members wanted, we could have a look at that to see if we can tighten the condition, certainly. But we felt it was okay the way it was worded.
I just think because of its proximity, some of the residents raised objections that there might be sort of antisocial behaviour. I don't necessarily subscribe to that. And you wouldn't think a steel container would be particularly flammable, but if it's being clad with wood and there might be flammable materials inside it, if there was that potential threat from antisocial behaviour, I wouldn't like to see any dangerous gases or anything stored in it, because obviously the inherent risks to the fire brigade. So I'm okay with it exclusively for the use of football equipment, cones and netting and whatever else they use. That would be fine.
Right, the officer will look into, tightening it up, obviously, that condition. Does wish that to happen? Yes. Okay then. Right, any other questions? Gwyn?
Hi. I noticed there's 12 objections. I've been reading through them all, and I think a few of them have been pulled in here, right? A bit lost on that one there. I know we put the diagram on there. When we went on a site visit, they were next door to the pavilion down there, weren't they? They were going to build it. So where in relation on it, I didn't see it, I know he'd done it before, but I didn't see a red light going there where he was.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know if you can,
No,
on the left hand.
I can see it now, yeah. So that's it.
That was the initial.
That's where he was originally.
Yes.
Now they come right back up that path, and where's the social club on it down the bottom
The
right?
social club is here, and then there's footpaths that
It's a fair way from the football pitch, yeah.
The pitches start here. I think they've got a number of ages that run from top to bottom.
Yeah,
I think the pitches, this mini pitches, start around here, and then so that would be.
I know where I am now. I didn't see the red thing first of all. I know the concerns we had on the site visit was, and we was talking to somebody walking past, was the key holders. There was a bollard there or something. Can you remember? There was a bollard there, and they said something about somebody got the key to it, and there was a lot more than one vehicle going in there, wasn't it, parking all across on the grass. Is there any way we can alleviate that?
I think you may be talking about there's in relation to the parking issues that there have been.
Yeah, apparently when it's laid down there on a match day, I know there's.
Yeah, Gwyn, I think you're thinking of a different site. I think you're thinking of the Cross-y-Ceiliog site.
No, we went around social club, didn't we? We walked up through.
Yeah.
No,
This is the same area, but it's a different site.
Yeah, we think you're thinking of a different site. Yeah.
That's Woodland Road.
No, we didn't walk up the lane. That was Woodland Road. We had this last July. We went to the site visit for this application. Yeah.
We'll be parking around, so we couldn't, did we?
That was Woodland Road.
Oh, yeah, the key was across the hill, yeah. In and around the side, we walked all the way up, didn't we? And they said we could be
Yeah. Okay, Gwyn. You're all right with that? Right, any other questions or comments? Who?
Thank you, Chair. Just one final quick point. I'm sorry I wasn't able to attend the site visit for this, but it seems that this is being recited. Just wanted to get clarification now on the distance between where it's going to be located and where the residents' houses are from the sort of new sense of scale on that diagram there, please.
Yes, the officer will show you now the scale.
So this is the closest residential property here, and that is 20 metres from their boundary to the edge of the container. Okay.
Okay then, Hugh?
Yes, thank you.
Right, any other questions, comments? Hang on, somebody put their...
Just going to move the officer's recommendation of approval.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's been seconded. Right, were you going to ask another
Just not a question, just a statement. With the objections, I noticed there was a few with Carnarvon Crescent and all that for the parking. Well, if that's coming right down this area, it's going to make it a bit easier for the parking up there and annoying people. So I'll go along with that.
Yeah.
What's the barrier?
That's what we said.
Right, you okay now, Gwyn?
Yeah.
Right, we've had a proposal and it's been seconded. All in favour? Right, that looks unanimous. Unanimous. Anyone against? Abstentions? No, that was unanimous. This planning application has been approved. Lenny, can I ask you to turn your mic off, please? Thank you. Right, we go to agenda item 5, which is application number 19P 0609 VAR. The proposal is revised bin store design to rear of plots 39 to 47 at former Llantarnam Primary School site. The application is on pages 37 to 43 and Helen Smith. Yeah, and Helen Smith will run through it now after Polly has spoken to Faye.
Just to clarify, in agenda item 5, Councillor Jones, you are going to declare a personal non-prejudicial interest as a member of Cwmbran Community Council who's been consulted on the application, is that right?
That's correct.
Just record that in the minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you. Yes, this application relates to the former Llantarnam Primary School site that's currently at a very advanced stage of development. It's now known as Oakfield Grange. As part of the original planning application for the whole development, there was one block of flats proposed within the site. Because of the nature of flats and bin stores, a bin store was required to be provided to serve the flats. There was a condition attached to the original planning permission requiring full details of the bin store to be submitted for approval because the scheme as originally proposed wasn't sufficient in size to accommodate all the necessary bins and recycling bins for the flats. So this is the original layout for the development. So here we have the block of flats and here are the rear parking court. And the bin store was going to be located in this position. But as I said, it wasn't large enough to accommodate our waste requirements. So the condition was attached. So we subsequently then had an application to discharge that condition. And it was in the same location. It was a slightly larger. It was 1 metre longer and 1 metre wider, but in the same location. And this is the approved bin store, constructed of timber with sheet roofing, and then sufficient accommodation for the bins, recycling bins, and the caddies. Our waste team was satisfied with this proposal, and therefore it was granted. However, when it was constructed, we received complaints that it wasn't constructed in accordance with the approved plans. What had been constructed was just an open compound of the same footprint, but with no roof. So this is the scheme as constructed, just a timber fence, approximately 2.2 metres high, slightly larger than an average fence. But following complaints, the applicant submitted this retrospective planning application. We consulted on this, and we received a number of complaints from residents adjacent to the bin store following issues that they've had with the open nature of the bin store in terms of the visual impact of it, in terms of looking down into it, and also issues that they've had with birds and vermin and just being generally open to the elements. As a result of that, we negotiated with the applicant to actually install a roof on it to prevent these issues. So the scheme as amended, which we are now considering today, includes now a roof on it, still constructed with a timber cladding and a timber door, but with the enclosed roof. Here we have the photo. This is it without the roof as it was currently constructed. So here are the block of flats, and here is the property that's most affected. Here we have another photo of it. This again from the rear parking court. And here, so the amended proposal is we've attached a condition requiring them to install the roof in accordance with the approved plans within 1 month of receiving planning permission should it be granted. And here's another. We feel that the inclusion of the roof, the two schemes from the approved scheme and this amended scheme are very, very similar. It's a slightly different design of the roof as it's been retrofitted to this structure, but it prevents any issues with birds and any issues being open to the element. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Are there any questions? Who? Oh,
Thank you, Chair. I'm a bit concerned by this, to be honest, that I think the residents have got a point here when they object with these objections that have been received in terms of the design, the visual appearance, even the functionality of it as well. It says that they're arguing that the bin store does have a functional design and is constructed of timber, and there are limited opportunities in relation to the design of bin stores. I don't accept that. I think this to me looks like it's being done on the cheap. I am concerned that it's just wooden slats. I think it does pose a potential health hazard with vermin and rats if they're able to get in via the slats. In my experience, where I've seen bin stores have been constructed, they've been constructed solidly out of brick and not wooden slats. Wooden slats will only have a certain lifespan anyway. Even if it's pressurized timber, you're only going to get probably a maximum of 10 years out of it, especially maybe less in a heavy usage area. So and I do think that in terms of visual aspect and amenity, I've got concerns there as well. I'm minded to reject this and see if they could resubmit new plans with a better design. I don't think it's good to put in a retrospective application after they've already put this in with the condition that they're going to construct a roof on it within a month's time. And I do realise that by having it open, where you've got seagulls and other birds coming in, they're going to access it as well if the roof isn't on. So it's not so much a question as more of a statement. I think that they could do a better job on this, to be honest. And it does say, actually, in terms of the visual amenity, there is a reference to Torvine's plans on that in terms of aesthetics as well. One of the things that came up in the training for planning committee members yesterday was an important point that was made by the barrister, that the decisions that are taken by this committee have a lasting legacy after we've finished as councillors. That's all I wanted to say on it. Thank you.
Right, but it's not a retrospective application. The application has been before the committee previously and approved, but the roof wasn't put on. And now we're going to make sure the roof was put on. I don't know whether the officer wants to add anything to that.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, yes, in terms of design, it's always things that that can be done to improve appearances. However, this is what they've proposed, and we feel, given this location from a rear parking court, because this is the rear of the flats, and given it's viewed up against that timber fence, we felt that on balance it was acceptable from a visual point of view. In terms of the roof, we negotiated them to put the roof back on. But another issue we have is obviously they already have approval. Oops, going the wrong way. So what we have to look at is the differences between the approved scheme and what's proposed now, and that they are actually very marginal. So this is the approved scheme, and obviously this is how they've built it, and this is the resultant amended scheme. So the roof has been added to prevent issues with being open to the elements and birds. Which should overcome a lot of the issues that the neighbours are experiencing. But actually, they could implement that scheme, and we felt the differences between the two were so marginal that we couldn't justify a refusal on that basis. Thank you.
Right. Just go back to the photo that you had there, please, because I wanted to see whether there was, in that, what had been approved, it doesn't look like there's gaps there between the timber. But what's being constructed there are gaps, and I think the residents are concerned about the ingress of mice and rats getting into that.
There are very marginal gaps for ventilation. Yes, mice and rats could possibly get in there, but they can get into any building. They can get into brick-built buildings as well. And if mice and rats do become an issue, obviously there's environmental health legislation that can deal with that, and that's not really a planning consideration. What we've tried to do is to ensure the trouble with bins, if you don't have bin stores on flats, they'll be open to the elements, all the bins, so visually that would look worse. What the bin stores are designed to do is to contain them, cover them, protect them, to prevent any issues with the concentration of bins. So if we didn't have a bin store, then that could potentially cause more problems.
Thank you. Right, we'll move on. Steve, then Veronica.
I'll have to declare in English because I'm on South Wales Fire Authority. The question I asked, have we taken any advice off the fire service regarding the use of this wood near this building?
Not from the fire service, but we have from our building control team, because the fire regulations are dealt with under building regulations. This site has actually not been inspected by the council's building control team. It's by a private building control regulator. I've been informed by them that outbuildings generally only require sort of building regulations if they are over 15 square metres in floor space, and this is just under 15 square metres. So the fire regulations with building control wouldn't apply in this instance, and fire regulations are dealt with under different legislation.
The reason I ask this, throughout Torvine, the service has been having a lot of problems with bins being set on fire. So this is my concern, particularly if it being a wood structure, and that's why I raised the point then. Particularly, perhaps we need to speak to the fire service as whether it is compatible for use.
Do you want to answer that?
I think that the point is there's lots of timber sheds built in lots of gardens all over the borough. You can't legislate for people coming in and setting them alight. That bin store would have to be managed properly by the organisation looking after the flats. So from our experience, it's not uncommon to have a bin store very much like that. So I don't think, given that we've spoken to building regulations, they've been very clear on the regulations, that we would have any grounds to refuse it on that basis.
Perhaps we need to look at that in the future, to something, on a risk assessment, which could be quite detrimental to the people living it.
Right, Veronica.
Thank you, Chair. I must admit, looking at this, I feel quite concerned at the proximity of those ground floor windows to the store. Thinking in terms of flats, blocks of flats that we've got around Torvine, most of them have the stores either incorporated into the building or at the side of it, and people don't overlook it directly, or it's at a distance. If I don't know what is the other side of these parking spaces, but I would have thought somewhere like that would have been much better in terms of, if we're talking of people's well-being. Doesn't look as if we are looking at that, does it? I certainly hope in any future plans that we have, we don't see stores like that so close to the accommodation.
Yes, the officers can't really comment on that. But it depends how much room there's there, to put it. But new blocks of flats would have, the conditions would be far better. I mean, these flats are already up and running, so they have no choice really but to put them in the position they're in now. Okay? Janet, then Gwyn.
Thanks, Jay. If it's already been approved, how can we make changes? We can't retrospectively alter decisions already made. We can only observe what's done. And that's what we're here for, aren't we, to make a decision on what's actually taken place and have been amended?
Yes, this application was approved before, but the roof wasn't put on. It's as
We're only
simple as
discussing
that.
the amendments made for a roof on. We can't alter any decision because it's retrospective now, isn't it?
Gwyn.
Yes, thanks, Janet. I was going to say that one. Am I right in saying that the only thing in there is bins, and the bins got lids on, and the refuse vehicle comes up to there, does it, and collects it?
Yes, it's all the normal bins that every resident in Torvine has. It's the general waste bins, the recycling boxes, and the food caddy bin stores. The waste pickups will be round the back of the court, through the parking court. Access through here and picked up from there.
So technically then there should be nothing to encourage any vermin or seagulls going in there if it's all in bins and the bins are closed.
That's the idea of it. Obviously, human nature, you can't make sure all the bins are shut, but obviously as the residents of the flats live so close as well, I would imagine that they wouldn't want to cause any issues, because any issues that arise for the neighbours would also be issues for the residents as well. And ultimately it's the residents, how they manage their bin stores, is down to them as well.
Right, Hugh?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll pick up on the point that the other councillor just made, that the planning consent has already been granted for this, and we're not here to, look at the original planning application. I must say that I've got to say I'm surprised it was passed for a number of reasons. The proximity to the building. If you imagine you're living in one of those flats, you're not going to be able to open your rear windows at all. It was mentioned the slats were there for ventilation. Can you imagine the smell that's going to come into your properties? I think the proximity issue to the block of flats as well. I think it's far too close. If you were looking at access for emergency service vehicles, I think there's a potential health hazard there. And safety risk, you know, in terms of if they needed to get fire extinguishers in there or ambulances, and just the site in the proximity, and I think the aesthetics are horrible as well. I know we're only debating whether to put a roof on it and enclose it, but I think it perhaps should be fully enclosed. I don't know if there's any legislation from a planning perspective impacting smells and odours. Is there anything relevant in the planning about that?
I don't know. Thank you, Helen.
There's none at the moment, just in terms of it's our general considerations as part of looking at the whole scheme. But I have been contacted by our waste team, and they are looking to do a design guide for bin stores. So this is something that hasn't been done yet, but they are looking towards that, and this is something I can certainly feed back to them in terms of issues that the members have, and hopefully get a design guide which we could adopt for planning guidance, and then the new schemes coming forward then could be in accordance with that adopted guidance.
That would only apply to new schemes, would it? And we can apply that retrospectively. Okay.
Right, any more questions? Anybody want to move?
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Yes, it's been seconded. Right, we'll vote those for the officer's recommendations. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 4. Those against? Abstentions? 2 abstentions. Right, this planning application has been approved. Right, we go on to agenda item 6. It's application 19P 0610 FUL, which was deferred from the January planning committee meeting, and the proposals for the construction of a new Welsh medium primary school, car parking, landscaping and associated work sited at Ysgolgafn Gwynllwch, Folly Road, Trebethyn, Pontypool. And Sarah Hensby now will just update us because we had a site visit on the 12th of February, and this is just an update now. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. As Chair has said, the application was presented to Planning Committee in January and deferred for further site visit, which took place on the 12th of February. Members who attended that site visit have seen the access to the proposed car park for the allotment. In addition, a query was raised at the last planning committee, and that's actually covered in the report, but in summary, the allotments are community allotments. They're not part of the allotment association. They have their own committee and chair. There's currently 13/14 plots that are actually in use. The recommendation for the application remains with a recommendation for approval. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. Any questions from members? No? You all satisfied with the update? Anybody want to move it?
Move it and then...
You're moving the officer's recommendation with the conditions. Thank you. Is there a seconder? Thank you. Right, we're ready to vote on it. Those for the application. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 8 for. Can you keep your hands up for Rachel to count? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 9. 9 for. Those against? 1 against. Abstentions? 1 abstention. This planning application has been approved. Thank you. And that concludes the meeting today. Thank you all for your attendance, and I close the meeting.